Hi, my name is Liam Huggins, and this is a debate response to Joseph Chester on the topic of are border walls generally good for national security. We're going to be looking at Joseph's video from the top down in terms of the claims he is making. First is that the U.S. is currently failing to control its borders, mainly for the reason that Biden has stopped construction on the border wall. Before getting into how the flow of migration south of the border is separate from the construction and existence of the border wall, I'm going to mention the fundamental flaws of Trump's border wall. Even before much of the construction took place, libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute, listed numerous legal challenges to Trump's plan. First, that being of 70% of the prior existing border wall being constructed on federal land along California, Arizona, and New Mexico, with most of the borderland along Texas being privately owned, which will require eminent domain. These resulted in lengthy legal battles, with one such case taking 7 years during the Bush presidency. Native American tribes such as the Tohono O'odham Nation have lands on both sides of the borders and fought strongly against border wall construction in the past. Water rights are also an issue, with a 1970 treaty between the U.S. and Mexico requiring the floodplains of the Rio Grande to remain open on both sides of the borders. These limitations are most likely what caused the Trump administration to only construct just 80 miles of new barriers in places where there was none before. In addition to the limited ability to construct new barriers, those that have gone in have proved to not be structurally sound against natural weather. According to reporting by US Today in January 2020, winds going about 37 miles per hour knocked over several sections of the newly constructed border wall by Mexicali. More recently, in August of this year, The Guardian reported that 6 gates were washed out near Douglas due to monsoon weather. These areas of high flooding require floodgates, which in remote areas will need to be opened manually and left unattended for months, compromising the effects of said wall. The reality of these changes in immigration patterns between 2020 and 2021 is also much more complicated than the stopping of border construction. One such example is that of the Haitian immigrants. Much of the quote-unquote crisis at the border right now is at the Haitian immigrants and asylum seekers. According to a New York Times article, these people have been driven up from South America mainly. This is due to 2 reasons. Many former Haitian asylum seekers after the earthquake in 2010 went to Chile and Brazil. In Brazil, work opportunities have shrunk throughout COVID. In Chile, much of the exodus is due to governmental restrictions on the visa. In addition, there's also a strong anti-black culture of discrimination in Chile. The second major reason is that those Haitians coming here are doing so because they cannot go back to Haiti, as it's just suffered a presidential assassination and another devastating earthquake. Another important factor to consider is COVID. All forms of immigration dramatically dropped in 2020. According to the Cato Institute, immigration visas dropped by 84%. Arrival of legal permanent residents dropped over 90%, creating the lowest rates of legal immigration since World War II. The threat of COVID created some of the harshest conditions and tightest regulations for immigrants in the south of the border. According to a report by the American Immigration Council, by February 2020, Trump had placed 5 different travel restrictions on individuals who had been present in countries with COVID-19. In March 2020, all non-essential travel at ports of entry were closed off. This left 147,000 people arriving at the border expelled. All asylum seekers had their hearings indefinitely suspended, leaving 20,000 people stranded in Mexico. It should be noted that these suspensions of all asylum cases is likely a violation of international and domestic law. Those in detention centers are also unable to get social distance or get protective gear such as masks to avoid getting COVID. From March to September of 2020, over 6,000 people tested positive for COVID, with 8 people dying in these detention centers. Outside forces like COVID, foreign job opportunities, and natural disasters all play a part in how immigration on the south border comes up north. Joseph also mentions how Biden is doing a poor job handling the influx of migration at the border and how those coming through the south border illegally present an inherent security risk. The claim just isn't true when looking at the statistics, though. According to Track Immigration, a nonprofit information center on immigration ran by professors from Syracuse University, in 2020 there was 1.2 million individuals involved in the current immigration backlog. Just 1.3% of those individuals with cases in the court's backlog involve alleged criminal activity. Out of those 1.2 million cases are just 79 cases involving national security and 17 are involving alleged terrorism violations, which can range from membership in a foreign terrorist organization to simply being likely to engage in a terrorist activity. According to a study done by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, undocumented immigrants have substantially lower crime rates than native-born citizens and legal immigrants. Relative to undocumented immigrants, U.S.-born citizens are over 2 times more likely to be arrested for violent crimes, 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for drug crimes, and over 4 times more likely to be arrested for property crimes. In addition, the proportion of arrests involving undocumented immigrants in Texas was relatively stable or decreasing over this period. Another piece of evidence Joseph uses is claims of on-the-ground border agents, such as ex-border chief Rodney Scott, who claim that after he left, there will be a huge wave of terrorism from south of the border like never seen before because of the actions of Biden. Now, individuals like Rodney Scott are key examples of downward politicalization, with Scott taking in information that only confirms to his prior beliefs of border security. In the case of downward politicalization, Rodney Scott gained much of his belief in the effectiveness of border walls during his time serving in San Diego. The first border walls put up in San Diego both show the reason for Scott's strongly held belief and the fatal flaws in them as well. Going back to the earlier mentioned Cato article, quote, from 1997 to 1999, when the San Diego sector was reinforced with 9 miles of secondary fencing and even more agents were added, the numbers did finally slow. But looking at the apprehension figures, it appears that San Diego simply pushed the problem even further east, to the El Centro, Yuma, and Tucson sectors. Each agent in those places ended up apprehending more people after the fence was built than before. Real quickly, I'd like to address Joseph's point on the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan and becoming a harbor for terrorism with groups like ISIS-K cropping up. Most recently, on September 1st, Army General Mark Milley said that it is possible that the U.S. will be working with the Taliban to fight ISIS-K. American officials have assessed that the Taliban are enemies with ISIS-K in Afghanistan. This shows that the Taliban is taking a stand to terrorism by other groups and will not let terrorist cells foster like in the past. Finally is the issue of human security. Joseph mentions the issue of ranchers being looted along the border, but I'd like to take a moment to look at the larger picture on those doing the crossing. In Trump's final year in office, while there may have been a record low immigration rates due to new border constructions and harsh COVID restrictions, this came with a great loss. Another record in 2020 was the record death of those crossing the border via Arizona. According to Human Borders, 227 people died trying to cross. In total, at least 7,000 migrants have died trying to cross since 1998. Looking back to the first border wall constructed in San Diego, it may have proven effective in slowing crossings between Tijuana and San Diego, but it did not lower crossings overall and pushed into a far more dangerous area. The increased militarization of the border by individuals like Trump and Rodney Scott may show some short-term successes, but often comes at the cost of hundreds of lives, and does not and will not solve the problem of illegal immigration. Ending on that, thank you for your time.